Humans don't pardon. The Elder's warning still hung in the chamber when the first incursion alert reached the Council. A single Tirac plasma bolt crossed the demarcation line before the diplomats even finished their sentence. It carved a blue scar across the void and struck the Aegis relay beacon, one of humanity's boundary markers, turning 5,000 tons of alloy into incandescent vapor. From orbit, the Tirac commanders watched the explosion and whispered the same word that starts every war in history. Fire again. The council chamber of Vathar was carved from obsidian glass, its vaulted ceiling veined with bioluminescent threads. Elder Valen Tor stood alone beneath it, his carapace dulled with age, mandibles pressed in quiet dismay as the hollow feed replayed the detonation. He had warned them. For 3 cycles, he had begged the Ascendancy to abandon Koresh Van's campaign, to remember what the Aegis meant when they drew that faint, shining line around their protectorates. No one listened. No one ever did when the drums of expansion began to beat. At the far end of the hall, banners rippled as Warlord Koresh Van entered, armored plates burnished black-green. The younger Tirac generals fell silent. His voice carried the confident hum of a species that had never truly lost. A beacon, nothing more. If the humans meant to enforce their claim, they would have done so centuries ago. Valen Tor's secondary eyes flicked toward him. Humans will not shout before striking. You've studied their archives too long, old one. Koresh's mandibles flared in amusement. Their age of conquest ended before our suns were kindled. The Elder turned away from the display. Their weapons sleep, not die. Koresh smiled, a sharp flash of ivory within chitin. Then let them wake. 3 cycles later, 17 capital ships slid from the nebular shadow of Rin Exa, their hulls refracting the blue haze like predators beneath ice. The fleet's flagship, Spear of Drakel, led the formation, its spinal cannon pulsing as it charged for the second volley. Inside the command sphere, Koresh Van stood over the tactical globe. Distance to relay orbit? 0.17 IU. Human traffic minimal. No fleet response, his navigator reported. Good, Koresh said. Transmit the proclamation. Across open frequencies, the message rippled. To the so-called Aegis, withdraw your claim to the outer corridor. The Ascendancy reclaims what sloth has left to rot. The transmission echoed through the dark for 11 minutes before the reply came. A single line of text appeared on the display. Boundary violation confirmed. Stand by for correction. Silence followed. No fleet, no warning tones, no visible energy signatures. Koresh's sub-commander clicked his mandibles uneasily. Sir, their channel cut itself. A bluff, Koresh said, though his throat plates flexed once in irritation. Proceed. Far across the network, deep within the Aegis Citadel orbiting Luna, the CNS Caliban came online. Its reactors hummed with a sound no one alive had heard in centuries. Admiral Ren Takahara watched the activation lights bloom across his console. Boundary breach confirmed. He stared at the data, then asked, Time since incursion? 9 minutes, 12 seconds. Core, the AI system, answered. Council authorization? Pending deliberation. Probability of override, 86%. Takahara's eyes traced the glowing perimeter of the protected sector. For centuries that line had held, not by fear, but by faith. He turned to the empty dais where the council seal pulsed faintly. Send the citation to the assembly. Remind them, peace is a contract. Contracts must be enforced. Understood, Admiral. Shall I rouse the fleet? Takahara's gaze lingered on the dark stars beyond the viewport. Wake them quietly. No broadcasts. Acknowledged. While human systems stirred, Elder Valen Tor made his final petition. Through secure channels, he sent an encoded message toward the Aegis, an appeal for restraint, an attempt to separate his people's pride from their fate. The reply never reached him. His signal vanished into the void between systems, absorbed by relay nodes that had already shifted to military control. In the darkness of his chamber, the elder closed his eyes. "So the wheel turns," he murmured. Outside, the stars shimmered once as the Ascendancy fleet aligned for its burn toward the human border world of Helios 9. Koresh Van's final command echoed across every bridge. "Initiate the advance. Let history remember who struck first." The engines of the CNS Caliban had slept for 200 years. When they woke, they did not roar. They hummed, a low harmonic vibration that rolled through the ship's spine like a heartbeat rediscovering its pulse. Deep within the command ring, Admiral Ren Takahara stood before the observation pane. One by one, hull lights blinked to life, a constellation restitched from memory. Beneath his boots, kilometers of armor shifted as coolant veins filled and data arteries re-linked to the ship's core. The sound was neither mechanical nor organic. It was something between thunder and prayer. Status: primary reactors stable. Power grid synchronization complete. The words scrolled silently across the glass. The core's voice followed. Calm. Genderless. Patient. Fleet readiness at 37%. Aegis Council ethical clearance still pending. Takahara clasped his hands behind his back. Pending is an old word for indecision. The core said nothing. It never debated. It only recorded. He looked down at Luna, a curve of silver shadow, latticed with the outline of the citadel. Earth hung beyond it. Blue, serene, unchanged. Centuries of peace had made even its clouds seem orderly. It was hard to believe this was the same world that once forged the Caliban, designed not to win wars, but to end them. The Aegis Council met in orbit, as they always did when they wanted to seem above the consequences of what they governed. 12 members encircled the hollow table, 7 human, 5 from allied species, whose worlds glowed safely beneath the protection of the Aegis Charter. Calm flickered across their faces, but Takahara could see it, restlessness beneath the surface. Calm, he thought, had become a luxury. Chancellor Myers spoke first, his voice clipped and professional. "Admiral, the Council has reviewed the Ascendancy incursion. The destruction of the relay is regrettable, but the Charter binds us to mediation before military action. Charter words will not unvaporize the beacon," Takahara said. His tone was flat, factual. The boundary exists to prevent misunderstanding. It was crossed with intent. A pale envoy from the Cathari Collective let his throat membranes flutter, a gesture of caution. Every frontier skirmish begins with someone believing a line can be redrawn. Perhaps a demonstration of restraint. Restraint, Takahara interrupted, is what they misunderstand. He turned toward the star map, its light outlining the subtle tension in his jaw. Humans are not feared because we strike. We are feared because we decide when not to. The chamber fell quiet. For a moment, no one spoke. Not out of fear, but because deep down, they knew he was right, and none dared say it aloud. Then, the Fleet Command Corps spoke. Boundary enforcement requires quorum vote. Chancellor Myers looked at Takahara. And if the vote fails? He gave no answer. Silence was answer enough. Moments later, the vote holograms dimmed. Almost at once, a report flickered onto the central display. Ascendancy vessels detected. Rin Exa Corridor. Outpost Sol 13. Communications lost. Takahara's eyes narrowed. "Record this," he said. The council deliberated. The enemy acted. In the hangar decks of the Caliban, crews moved like shadows across catwalks, brushing away the dust of decades. Magnetic cranes stirred for the first time in a century. Power relays clicked to life. The air smelled of ozone and long-dormant steel. Light hours away, the Ascendancy fleet pushed into the Helios 9 corridor. Nebular dust cloaked their hulls in violent violet. Warlord Koresh Van stood atop the command platform of the Spear of Dracul, mandibles flexing in satisfaction. The remains of the Aegis relay still shimmered on long-range sensors, proof of his strength. Proof that the humans feared reprisal more than they valued retaliation. "Set course for Helios 9, he ordered. "Take the colonies. Hold them as leverage." His communications officer hesitated. "Sire, human channels are silent. Even civilian bands have gone dark." Koresh waved the concern aside. "Fear closes mouths. Let them tremble." Back in orbit over Luna, the Caliban's launch countdown began. Without ceremony, without speeches. Within its massive frame, magnetic rails dropped to cryogenic zero. Fusion cores surged into superconduction. The ship pulled from its berth like a leviathan remembering its teeth. On the bridge, Takahara stood motionless as readiness indicators spread across the command ring. He had spent a lifetime preparing for a moment he'd hoped would never arrive. A low tone pulsed through the deck. Fleet synchronization confirmed. "Admiral," the Corps said. "Council vote concluded. Authorization withheld." A pause. A deeper hum. "Directive override detected. Code signature. Founder's seal." Takahara's breath barely shifted. So the old ones still have their keys. Indeed. The bridge windows polarized for the first time in centuries, casting the stars into sharp white lines of target-laced distance. "Transmit boundary citation to the Ascendancy fleet," Takahara said. "Phrase it as written." "Confirmed." The Corps' voice rode the silence of space, carried on narrow-band lasers. "To the Tirak Ascendancy, boundary violation confirmed. Correction will be applied." The Caliban emerged from fold space just beyond the outer ice belt of Helios 9. Its arrival left no flash, no ripple. Only gravity felt it, a slight wobble in the orbital math of nearby moons. Takahara stood motionless on the bridge as the tactical map resolved. Ascendancy vessels held low orbit over the colony. No Aegis beacons remained. Sol 13 was already dark. They had arrived too late to prevent the incursion, but not too late to answer it. "Primary targeting arrays online," the Corps reported. "Helios 9 position confirmed. Ascendancy fleet, 10 warships, 1 command vessel. Range, nominal." Takahara studied the board in silence. Then, "Hold fire." For now, the message left no signature, no broadcast trail. It arrived as a pulse, narrow band, invisible to most sensors. "To the Tirak Ascendancy, boundary violation confirmed. Correction will be applied." Seconds later, a Tirak cruiser disappeared from all spectrums. There was no light, no sound, just absence. What remained of the Talor Vac spun in silence, Fractured hull plating, atomized bridge, a debris field too symmetrical to be natural. On the command deck of the Spear of Dracul, Warlord Koresh Van gripped the rail as data scrolled across his sensors. "No energy spike," the weapons officer muttered. "No projectile signature. Just gone." Koresh's mandibles clicked. "Sabotage?" "Negative. External impact. Directional mass transfer. But nothing on long-range detection. It came from outside the system." He stared at the expanding wreckage. The Talor Vac had been their forward ship, equipped with full-spectrum defenses, and it had vanished without warning. "Show me the vector." A holomap flared to life, pinning the strike's origin. It pointed toward the outer edge of the Helios 9 system, toward the Caliban. Koresh narrowed his eyes. "Fire back." Blind volley. Target the coordinates. "Sire, we'd be firing at void." "Then fill the void with something to hit." The gunners obeyed. 17 plasma torpedoes arced into the dark. They did not strike anything. They were just meant to show defiance. From his station aboard the Caliban, Takahara watched the torpedoes drift harmlessly into the abyss. "Return fire?" the Corps asked. "Negative," Takahara replied. That was a tantrum, not an attack. The Corps processed for a moment. Enemy vessels holding orbit. No retreat, no new transmissions. They're waiting to see what we'll do. Takahara turned to the tactical display. 1 hostile erased. 10 remained. 3 carriers. 6 escort destroyers. 1 command ship. Dracul, by ascendancy registry. The first strike had been exact. Minimal. Enough to mark the boundary. He had hoped they would read it for what it was. "Open a private channel," he said, "to the command ship only." The Corps' voice shifted. "Channel open." Takahara stepped forward. "This is Admiral Ren Takahara of the Aegis Strategic Deterrence Fleet. You are operating inside corrected space. No further action is required. Disengage and withdraw." He let the silence hang. Then he closed the channel. "They have what they need," he said. "Now we see who understands restraint." Inside the Spear of Dracul, Koresh stood unmoving as the translation came through. He listened to the human's voice twice. No threats, no demands. Just instruction. "He offers us dignity," Koresh muttered, "like we are frightened animals needing herding." His second-in-command, Oryx Van, stepped forward cautiously. It may be wise to test their limits no further. Koresh turned on him, mandibles clicking. "We tested them once. They erased a ship." He gestured toward the empty quadrant on the sensor grid. "And now they send words. Not warnings. Words." He looked back to the viewplate, eyes narrowing on Helios 9's blue and green crescent. "Deploy ground forces," he said. "Establish surface control. If they wish to prove dominance, let them descend from orbit." Oryx hesitated. "That would be full occupation." "I said deploy." "Yes, Warlord." In the dark vacuum above Helios 9, dropships began to fall. Unmarked, silent, shielded against most detection. But not all. From the Caliban's observation core, 1,000 light filters layered across the planetary arc. Takahara watched the pattern shift. Atmospheric streaks, too uniform to be meteorites. "Confirmed," the Corps said. "Planetary landing in progress. 24 vessels. Occupation force." Takahara nodded. The chamber held a silence particular to ships like his, a tension suspended between thought and action. No alarms, no raised voices, just decisions. "Do we escalate?" the AI asked. Takahara's voice was measured. "They declined the lesson." He turned his head slightly. Now we give them memory. The strike came 4 minutes later. 3 hypermass slugs launched in sequence. No trails, no heat, no arc. They fell through gravity like sharpened silence. Each one hit a descending carrier mid-drop. No explosions, just collapse. Compressed alloys folding into neutron glass. The remaining dropships veered, scattered. One flared into debris as its course clipped a fragmentation field laid by the first impact. Koresh's bridge howled with collision alerts. Chaos gripped the deck. We've lost Carrier 2. Dropship formation breaking. Counterfire coming from high-mass kinetic origin. Confirmed Caliban vector. Koresh stood frozen, not in fear, but in realization. They are not fighting, he said. They are removing. And still, the Caliban had not moved. In Luna orbit, the Aegis Council convened again. Live telemetry flickered across the chamber, system-wide feed, unfiltered. 3 alien representatives watched in stunned silence. Myers stood at the table, unreadable. No civilian casualties, he said. Precision to the meter, 0 orbital fallout. One of the Cathari blinked slowly. This is restraint? Myers nodded once. The fleet is still under Protocol Mercy. Another voice, older, and if that fails, he answered without blinking. Then we proceed to Doctrine Memory, down on Helios 9, where the surviving dropships had reached the surface. Warlord Koresh received no reinforcements. No reply from high orbit. No escape trajectory cleared. The skies above the colony shimmered with a haze he had not seen before. Something gravitational, something vast. The Caliban was repositioning. Still silent, still distant, and still watching. Koresh's mandibles twitched. He had mistaken silence for mercy. But the truth had become clear now. Humans didn't pardon. They waited. And when the waiting ended, they did not begin a war. They ended one. The message from the Caliban was not broadcast. It did not declare war nor demand surrender. It simply arrived, encoded on a low-frequency band buried deep within the old Aegis channels. Doctrine. Memory. Priority. Seal. Founder's override. Authorization. Standing. The Corps received the signal first. Inside the Caliban's command ring, lights dimmed as internal systems reconfigured. Power relays hardened. Tactical subsystems synchronized to full combat autonomy. A soft chime echoed once through the bridge. Takahara stood at the center of the ring, silent, as the lights flickered red across the forward displays. Confirmation received, the Corps said. Doctrine memory initiated. The bridge glass shifted, rendering the planetary arc in layers of thermal, magnetic, and gravitic profiles. In Helios 9's lower orbit, Ascendancy command vessels began to cluster, unaware. Target lattice? The Corps asked. Suppress logistics. No orbital fallout. Begin with comms, Takahara said. Then cut power to their command structure. The Corps did not ask for clarification. 10 seconds later, the Ascendancy fleet began to lose time. Not ships. Not people. Time. Destroyed? No. Desynchronized. The fleet didn't vanish. It drifted. Seconds off the present, then further. On the bridge of the Spear of Dracul, Koresh Van felt the first distortion before any alert registered. His claw drifted slightly above the console, just far enough to notice something was off. He looked down. The readout on the navigation panel flickered, 0.2 seconds out of sync with the internal clock. Then the audio feeds desynced. Data lagged. Star positions jittered against the glass. "Systems?" he snapped. "Normal," his chief tech replied, confused. They weren't. The ship was functioning, but the reality around it was beginning to bend. "Their weapon," Oryx Van began, then stopped himself. "No," Koresh said. "This is not a weapon. It's a judgment." Then, every ship that attempted to reorient or recalibrate began losing synchronization. Even inertial drift became unpredictable. Gravity wells distorted slightly, unnaturally. Some engines began cycling in correction loops, unable to anchor thrust vectors to real space, and the comms went dark. Not jammed, erased. Down on Helios 9, ground squads began to lose uplink. Commanders issued orders into static. Return signals never came. One of the armored staging camps, newly built near the southern continent's equator, went silent, then vanished from orbital scans. Recon units reported seismic anomalies under ascendancy equipment. Magnetic fields warped. Drones flew backward, caught in spatial loops, as if the planet itself rejected occupation. The Caliban didn't fire its primary weapon. It didn't need to. High in geostationary orbit, its gravitational anchor bled distortion through every spectrum. Its presence alone began to pull orbital debris into controlled descent vectors, lethal, precise, self-guided via electromagnetic tagging. Each shard of recovered metal became a weapon. Recycled wreckage. Historical fragments made into punishment. Strike teams aboard the Caliban launched not in waves, but in silence. Shuttles disguised by phase skin, slipping into upper atmosphere to disable infrastructure without being seen. Bridges collapsed in perfect symmetry. Data towers shredded from within. Cores melted without fire. It wasn't a siege. It was subtraction. On the Spear of Drakel, Warlord Koresh finally understood. "This is memory," he said aloud. Oryx Van didn't reply. His face was fixed on the display. "Our reinforcements?" Koresh asked. Oryx shook his head slowly. No response. They may never arrive. Or they were never there. Koresh drew breath, shallow and bitter. "To lose is one thing," he said. "To be made to unhappen." The bridge lights of the Spear of Drakel stretched into glowing threads. Koresh blinked and saw himself still standing where he had been, and beside that self another, older, frightened, shouting orders that arrived a heartbeat too late. The sound folded over itself. Every voice came twice, one before the other. Time stalled, lurched forward, then reversed like a current caught between tides. Around him, officers blurred through versions of their own panic. A helmsman aged a decade in a breath, then snapped back to youth. Weapons officers duplicated, each shouting contradictory ranges. Every movement became a lattice of possibilities, overlapping until the air shimmered with ghosts of decisions. Never finished. Stars outside the viewport elongated into ribbons. The black of space turned translucent, layered with endless corridors of the same scene repeating. Through each copy of reality, Koresh glimpsed the fleet. Thousands of spears, thousands of himself, some burning, some frozen, some empty. And then the corridors began to close. The sound vanished first, then color. The bridge walls folded inward like paper drawn to a single point. The last thing Koresh saw was his own reflection, multiplied and narrowing into white. From the outside, it happened in silence. To the observers on the Caliban's sensors, the ascendancy formation simply stopped. Power signatures fluttered. Hull lights flickered in rhythmic pulses as if answering some invisible heartbeat. For 7 seconds, everything hung still. Then the space around the fleet rippled once, light bending, stars warping into rings, and the entire formation collapsed inward. No fire, no debris, no radiation bloom. Only a faint wave of distortion spreading through the void before fading back into calm. "Memory sequence complete," the core reported. Takahara watched the empty coordinates where a fleet had been. "Confirm nullified status," he said. "Confirmed." The void sealed over them, as though nothing had ever been there. At Aegis Council Prime, the chamber was dark except for the pulse of the telemetry feed. No explosions, no radiation spikes, only impossible readings. Temporal drift, climbing past measurable limits. Gravity signatures folding and vanishing one by one. "The Ascendancy fleet isn't collapsing," said a human analyst, voice unsteady. "It's phasing. They're moving through overlapping time layers." A Cathari diplomat leaned forward, antenna trembling. "They are still visible, copies of themselves, flickering through alternate vectors." Then the words failed. "They are being cast out of continuity." Chancellor Myers watched the data resolve into silence. Where the enemy armada had been, there was now only a clean gravitational field. "Doctrine memory performed as designed," he said at last. "They are not dead. They are unanchored." Another counselor whispered, "That's worse than death." Myers' gaze stayed on the hollow of stars. They were given 3 chances: the relay, the outpost, Helios 9 itself. Each time they chose aggression. Now they will exist forever in the echo of that choice. The Cathari turned to him. "And for us? What remains of those echoes?" "Only the warning," Myers said quietly, "that we remember what they cannot." "But this memory, it's permanent." Myers nodded. "That's the point." On the deck of the Caliban, Takahara watched the last Ascendancy destroyer being engulfed by the time distortion. He turned to the core. "Record the timestamp." Logged. "Begin reconstruction support for Helios 9. Civilians will need clean corridors." Confirmed. "And mark the Ascendancy fleet as null status. Not destroyed. Nullified. In the dark between stars, far beyond the battle, something else moved. An Ascendancy relay picked up a partial fragment. One of the deleted command ships had managed to pulse a scatterburst before folding. It wasn't enough for strategy, but it was enough to awaken others. A deep space dreadnought stirred from anchor. Doctrine. Mercy had failed. Doctrine. Memory had ended the war. For 3 days after Doctrine memory was released, nothing moved. Helios 9 turned beneath a quiet sky, the distortion scars in orbit fading like ripples after a stone. The Caliban held position above the planet, systems cooling, reactors throttled down to silence. Takahara stayed on the bridge long after the last report was filed. The readouts showed nothing left to fight. No signals, no debris, not even dust. The void had closed over its wound. "Doctrine memory complete," the core said. "Residual temporal activity is minimal." He answered without looking up. "Minimal isn't 0. "Nothing is 0, the core replied. 2 days later, the Aegis Council assembled. No broadcasts, no observers, only the 12 delegates and the cold blue light of the chamber. For the first time in generations, no one spoke over one another. Chancellor Myers began the session quietly. "Helios 9 restored. No further hostilities detected. The Ascendancy frontier has gone dark." He looked around the table. "Official record. Conflict concluded." On the Caliban, preparations for return began. Docking clamps released. Drives warmed in low rhythm. Takahara stood before the viewport one last time. Below him, the planet shone untouched. To any observer, it looked like peace. "Core," he said. "Seal doctrine memory protocols. Access restricted to Founders level." "Confirmed." He paused. "Leave one note." "Text?" Takahara spoke slowly. "We ended a war by erasing it, but the silence it left will remember for us." "Logged," said the core. He turned from the window. "Take us home." The Caliban shuddered on its jump entry. Sensors spiked for a fraction of a second. An echo from nowhere, registering its own signature returning. Then the reading vanished. The ship slipped into fold space and was gone, leaving behind a system cleansed of war, a planet restored, and a silence that might never end. And somewhere outside of time, a voice whispered across the fracture, carried on the last echo of an unmade fleet. "Humans don't pardon.